YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for Kamen Rider Revice Episode 10. So we returned from our hiatus with a very solid, if not a little bit predictable episode. Like, I still enjoyed myself, but I felt the resolution of this arc going on felt rather predictable. There was one nice surprise, or not really a surprise, but something they've been hinting towards, but they hinted towards it more strongly in this episode, which I'll get to. But this episode was our official debut of Kamen Rider Live, as well as the next Revice form. It feels like almost every episode for the last little while we get both a new Rider and a new Revice form. But we had a cliffhanger last time with him about to Rider kick Evil, which obviously, you know, wasn't successful. Like, imagine if he had just killed him in the opening, that would have been it. That's not what happened, and he's like begging at his feet, and that comes into play later. Not the feet thing, but like what happened during that scene. Then you just kind of have everybody dealing with the aftermath, and like during this, Vice is kind of narrating everything to us and showing like the perspective of what's going on in people's minds. Like, he shows demons like inner turmoil and is kind of played for comedic purposes, but this skill to be able to see into people's psyches and see what they're going through comes into play later. And then you have a conversation with the dead man's talking a little bit about how they're annoyed that Kaguro isn't like passionate about their goals. You actually have the Lady Deadman's talking to the sister a little bit, and they've been foreshadowing some stuff with her, kind of a slow build for that. But this episode kind of more so drives it home, and I would say that was the more, not surprise of the episode, but the little bit more unexpected thing happening is that they're furthering the story and bringing her more into the plot outside of her just being their sister. And there was some really good stuff foreshadowing her role and sort of her thinking about things, and apparently she has rumors of becoming a writer, which I think seems pretty neat. I guess everybody in the family is going to become a writer. You get to be a writer, you get to be a writer, you get to be a writer. Because even though they've been sort of slowly building some things with her, I wasn't exactly sure what they were doing, and this came off as one of the more surprising things that happened in the episode, whereas everything else was more predictable. And you also have, you know, the professor talking to the, what's the name of the organization guy? The Phoenix guy, and he's talking about how this whole stuff with Evil didn't go the way they thought. And he's like, did you know this was going to happen from the beginning? And he's like, I'm just living out my passion of Kamen Riders through this. And it's some interesting stuff going on with this, because he's kind of like a big troll, and he's like just entertained by everything going on with this. And I'm still interested to find out about his like for the writers, you know, because originally it was supposed to be that they were in a fictional world, or a world where writers were fiction, and then now it's not, and it's all confusing, but I'm interested to find out more about that. But I thought that was funny that he's just being entertained by his love for Kamen Riders and is creating more drama. But then at the end, when he becomes, I almost said evil, when he becomes alive, he acts like that was his plan all along. So I'm really curious about that. I find him to be an interesting and entertaining character, because it seems like he's just entertained by the chaos he creates, but he's also engineering plans, and I thought there were some good scenes with him going forward. We have Revi and Vice in the bath, and Vice kind of reveals to him that his brother's still in there, because we saw that he has that ability to see inside people's minds, and he shows during that scene when he was at his feet that he went into his mind and he saw his brother still in there. And he sort of gives Revi the kick in the pants he needs to be resolved to save his brother, because he's feeling really hopeless about it. And it ties back into that story they talked about previously, about when they were little, and he found him, and when Iki found Daiji. And I thought there was going to be a little bit more to that, but I mean there was, but not in the way I was thinking. It just seemed like a funny story to tell, like, oh, of course, because he never gave up on me finding him during hide and seek. It just sounded funny. But it kind of created this nice parallel at the end when he saved him, of that he knew his brother would ultimately never give up on him, and you show that that happened when they were little, and that happened now. So it did wind up making a difference, and it was kind of a nice scene, and again, a nice parallel, but it just, on the surface, it just seemed like a funny line to connect back when they told the story without the visuals. And it leads to the scene during the confrontation with Iki and his brother, where he basically apologizes for not fully believing in him and sort of treating him badly and not realizing what he was doing to him, which I thought was a really great scene. I really liked it, both for the development of the brothers, but also because I feel main writers having to admit their faults has been few and far between in recent years, at least in my opinion. One of the things that's kind of annoyed me in the last few years is that it always seems like it's the main writer's way or the highway. And, you know, obviously they'll have characters disagreeing with them, but it's almost always presented to you, the audience, as what he's doing is the way. This is the way. No, it's not the way. And I thought it was refreshing to see him admitting that he was wrong about his perspective on this matter. And I thought that was really nice, because other ones are like, of course I want to be a writer dictator. Of course Terminators are good guys. That's the only way to think about this scenario. I know it's a bit of a different scenario, but it just felt kind of right, especially since we spent so much time talking about how Saber was the most specialist boy in all the world. And so it was kind of nice to have this moment of humility. And it led to Daiki being able, or Daiji, is it Daiki or Daiji? I've heard it both ways. Led to him having this breakthrough moment to break free of the control, and he's like, how many moments in eternity? And the shepherd boy says, he breaks through this glass thing and gives him the opportunity to defeat evil. And we get our debut of the geobrachial form, which I think it might be my least favorite form. I still think it looks good. Like, I like the design of it, like pretty much all the designs. But for me, it's the least visually interesting. Maybe I'll change my mind the more we see it. Again, I kind of wish we didn't have to have a form debut every episode, but it's not hindering it too much, so I won't complain too much outside of these few seconds that I'm complaining. After he breaks free, he's able to basically purify himself and the form, and we get the full debut of Kamen Rider Live, and we get to see his debut fight. I really like the live suit. I think it's really good looking. I'm a sucker for like white-based toku suits. Like, something about the way it contrasts other colors just looks really cool and clean. And I talked about this last week, and I talked about this, or not last week, I talked about it in my video talking about Kamen Rider Live, but I love the way that this whole thing works with the driver and the two forms kind of being this flip side of each other. I just think it's really neat. And like, I like the suit, but I also like the way that this whole thing works. It's a little bit predictable though. Like I said, this was good, but the way everything went down in terms of him being freed and then becoming Kamen Rider Live was a little bit predictable. I get a feeling that Evil will come into play at some point again down the road. I can't imagine them completely shelving that and that suit for the rest of the series, so I get a feeling it'll come into play later. It was predictable, but it was good, and I really liked the debut. I honestly expected the story to stretch out a little bit longer with Evil being an antagonist, but that's something that Revice has been surprising me with, is they'll set up these plots that I think is going to go on for a while, and then they resolve it rather quickly, and not necessarily in a bad way, because it leaves room for new avenues. Like, honestly, I didn't expect this to resolve so quick, but now we're going to have this interesting story with his sister, so I'm interested to see where that goes, and to see the dynamic of the two brothers working together, and if anything Evil-related comes up down the road. But I would give this episode a 4 out of 5. I thought it was a good episode, a solid introduction to Live. It was just a little bit predictable for me, more so than Revice has been. But what did you guys think of this episode? What did you think of the debut of Kamen Rider Live? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you can notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.